Hello, good evening, and welcome to 3ABN Today Live. This is our 2-hour sitting together, and allow me once again to thank you for sharing this part of your day with us. I find myself in the company of several dignified gentlemen, none the least of which is my co-host and friend of, I was counting, 35 years ago we met each other.
Wow.
At the Bethel Church in Brooklyn, New York. This is Pastor John Lomacang, and I need to make note, you are getting older, man. Your hair is gray, and you will note that my hair is not.
Okay. Well, that's a good observation. As you can tell, we are getting older. I do this so that you could think I'm wiser. This is really not anything to have to do with me getting older.
So this is like a fashion statement.
Yeah, it's a wisdom thing. Even my suit is gray, so that's just a fashion statement. But it's good to be here with you tonight.
It's good to have you here. And good to see you again. And as I said, we are in the company of some very astute gentlemen here.
That's right, that's right.
We are going to talk about, you know, there's an old story of a pastor who preached a very fine sermon his first day at the church, followed up with the exact same sermon the next week, and the church members came to him and said, why are we getting the same sermon, you know, every week? And he said, I'm going to keep preaching this till you get it right.
And I think tonight is one of those get it right topics.
Precisely. We are coming back to, you know, we've been talking about creation for several shows because we see the encroachment of other ideologies on our core beliefs as a clear and present danger. So we're coming at it from a slightly different angle tonight, Pastor John. But as we talk together, we want to reaffirm our roots, where we came from as a species, and the fact that we came from the hand of a loving God. And we brought some men who are eminently qualified to do that. We're taking a little different tack because we're dealing a little bit more with dinosaurs and bones and those kinds of things, which excites me, and I think does the same for you.
It's a topic that always leaves a lot of questions in the minds of those who are wondering, where did these monstrosities come from?
Yeah.
We see them as young children in cartoons. We go to museums and we see them propped up. We have never seen a live one, thank God for that.
Oh, praise the Lord.
But there has to be some explanation for it, and I think that our guests here tonight are going to give some credibility to it.
Yeah.
And so I think I'll leave it to you to go ahead and introduce who they are.
My pleasure. First up is Professor Art Chadwick. He is Professor of Geology and Biology at Southwestern Adventist University. I need to ask you quickly, when did Southwestern become a full university?
That would be in the early 1980s sometime.
So it's been
well, let's see. It's a university. No, that was quite a bit later than that. I don't remember what year.
I think it's fairly recent.
Yeah,
I'd say within the last 10 years.
I was thinking of changing from a junior college
to a senior college. Yeah. We praise the Lord for that. In the middle is Stu Hardy, a friend of long standing. And I say when you get our age, you don't say old friend anymore.
That's
you
true.
say friend of long standing. Media guy, Pastor. Stu, give us just a little background real quick. Who you've worked with, where you've been?
Well, I've been working in video for about 25, 27 years. Work with several of the Adventist media ministries, Quiet Hour, Faith for Today. More recently, I've been working with Southwestern, helping expand their media program there with a particular emphasis trying to teach students not only good skills, but to use those talent and skills for mission.
Yeah. He came to New York right after 9/11 with Dwight Nelson for The Evidence. He took him around to some of the haunts, you know, in Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn, you know, back in the back streets and whatnot to do some shooting.
Yeah. I don't know if I met you at, there was a media event done in Keene, Texas.
Yep.
I knew you were there. Just my file cabinet just opened up and I remembered your face. I'm not getting old. I just remembered.
Praise the Lord. Praise the
Good
Lord.
to have you here tonight.
Thanks.
And last but not least, Justin Woods. And we need to say, Stu and Justin are, Stu is I have to read this because he's the documentary producer for Dino Dig. And I love that name, Dino Dig. It's kind of a cool
got a
name.
ring to it.
Yeah. And Justin is the tech guy. We're going to talk about how he fits into all of this. This is a high-tech operation, Pastor.
Oh, I could see that. He's young, too. You could see that he doesn't have any archaeology in his veins. he's a young man.
I have highlights. No gray hairs, just highlights.
Praise the Lord for that. I didn't ask. Married?
Yes.
Married? Married. Not married.
Okay.
Oh, we got one.
Okay. We'll give the address at the end of the program.
Indeed we will. So you see, we're going to have a good time tonight because we've got a lot to discuss. And hopefully this will help put another pagan, the foundation of those who are looking for evidence that we are created by a loving God. So a lot to talk about tonight, Pastor.
That's right.
And we're going to have a good time doing so. Before we do that, one of our favorite groups this year, Vocal Union. You know the guys. And
okay.
really, really good group. And they're going to be singing a really wonderful song for us. And then we will come back and work our way through some of this really good stuff. See you just in a few minutes.
I wanna love you regardless if anyone else does. I wanna serve you even if I'm all alone. Though others forsake you, I wanna give you my faith and trust. Faithfully follow everywhere you go. I wanna love you regardless if anyone else does. I wanna serve you even if I'm all alone. Though others forsake you, I wanna give you my faith and trust. Faithfully follow everywhere you go. You are my sun in the morning, my star in the night. You're my manna from heaven, you're my fountain of life. You are my oil, you're my healing, my constant delight. You're my shepherd protecting me. You are my guiding light. Well, I want to praise you regardless if anyone else does. I want to thank you for the wonderful things you do. It doesn't matter if I am poor, if I am plenty. Everything I have, I give to you. You are my sun in the morning, my star in the night. You're my manna from heaven, you're my fountain of life. You are my oil, you're my healing, my constant delight. You're my shepherd protecting me. You are my guiding light. Oh, some people say you're not reality. Some people see just what they want to see. I see your power all around me, and I feel your presence deep inside of me. Well, I wanna love you regardless if anyone else does. I wanna serve you even if I'm all alone. If others forsake you, I wanna give you my faith and trust. Faithfully follow everywhere you go. You are my sun in the morning, my star in the night. You're my manna from heaven, you're my fountain of life. You are my oil, you're my healing, my constant delight. You're my shepherd protecting me. You are my sun in the morning, my star in the night. You're my manna from heaven, you're my fountain of life. You are my oil, you're my healing, my constant delight. You're my shepherd protecting me. You are my guiding light. Well, I want to love you regardless if anyone else does. I want to serve you even if I'm all alone.
Thank you so much for that wonderful song. I want to love you. And when we think about all the things that God is to us, that song really makes a lot of difference.
Surely does.
You know what really gets me, though, is I want to sing so badly, and every time I hear a group as good as they are, I want to just get up and sing with them, but I have to sit down and just talk tonight. So I'll settle for doing what I'm going to do
You've got to
tonight.
behave yourself till you're healed.
Exactly, until I'm healed. But until then, I want to find out something that I'm really a novice at. And so, Dr. Chadwick, I'm going to begin, could I use the phrase loosely, I'm going to dig into your background.
Sure.
At what point does a young man say, I want to concentrate on the field of paleontology for the remainder of my life? Tell us how you got there before we even talk about the topic itself.
I'll go back to the time when I was in high school. Actually, I was not a member of this church. I was a nominal Christian. I guess that's what you would call me. And I had decided that I was going into medicine and went off to a state university when I went to college. And when I was there, I met a young man who was also a student there who shared his faith with me. And after careful study with him and a friend of his, I decided that I wanted to become a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. And I continued then at the state university for another year. And by that time, I was convicted that I should go to an Adventist university. So I left the state university and went to a Adventist school and finished up my degree there. While I was there, one of the professors took me aside. I was still headed for medicine, and he encouraged me to pursue a career in studying the issues of origins and to get a PhD instead of an MD. And he, with the Holy Spirit, convinced me that was what I wanted to do. And so I went off to, I thought at that time I should be studying about evolution, so I went off to University of Miami and I took molecular biology, which was a brand new discipline at that time. And I finished up my degree there. And I was a little stunned to find out when I was done that molecular biology really wasn't about evolution at all. It was basically just a course in creation, and there really wasn't anything there that encouraged me to think that I could contribute much in that field. And I realized that a lot of the strong areas of challenge that we faced as Christians who believe in the biblical account of creation were in the area of geology and paleontology. So I went back to school again and did an undergraduate curriculum in geology at University of California, and then I went as a visiting professor to a major university in their geology department, and have been doing geology ever since.
So if I'm hearing you, and John, forgive me, your choice of discipline actually was an attempt to wrestle with some of the issues that you saw were facing the church. You went into this with the mindset of answering questions and solving problems for people.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, praise the Lord for that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people get confused, and I want to kind of settle this egg in the very beginning, if I could use that phrase loosely. We hear the phrase anthropology or archaeology and paleontology. Tell us where they differ and if any of the disciplines cross over into the same camp. So
very often people confuse archaeology with paleontology. And archaeology is the study of ancient ruins and ancient remains, but not of fossils. The study of fossils is a domain of paleontology. Geologists study rocks, paleontologists study fossils, archaeologists study human remains, anthropologists study humans.
Okay. So you're specifically in
geology and paleontology.
Okay. And now when we start with that, if we think of the specific area of tonight, dinosaurs, I want to just become I'm going to be the layman here.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to even attempt to cross over into an area where I could get my feet burned.
Precisely.
And so if I would begin with something that would come to the minds of those who are watching the program, we look at dinosaurs we've seen in museums, the Museum of Natural History, and we've seen them propped up and put together in their bone structure, but we wonder to ourselves where they come from. I'm just going to dive into that and lead us into the understanding of something that's still, to a great degree, a mystery to a lot of us.
I think dinosaurs are fascinating creatures. I know some people don't like to hear that. They want me to say that they're evil, ugly things, but I find dinosaurs to be wonderful. and have spent many years now studying them. And we began this work on dinosaurs actually as kind of a surprise to me as a result of a find on a ranch in Wyoming by a secular paleontologist who the ranch owner gave the opportunity to set up a permanent field station on his ranch if he would be willing to tell the students that were coming out there about creation as well as evolution. And the paleontologist said he couldn't do that. And they came to a stalemate over that issue, and finally the paleontologist left. And he wasn't very happy about it. He told the ranch owner that would be the last day that science would be done on the Hansen Ranch, and that was the end of that, and he left. And so the ranch owner then looked around for someone who was sympathetic with creation, with his beliefs, who would be willing to come out and develop the bones for science. He was really interested in having this resource not be sold or used for profit, but just to make it available for scientists. And so when we took on this responsibility, which we did shortly thereafter, it was with the objective of doing the best science we could do. And so we have worked, that was in the middle 1990s, and ever since then we've been working on this project.
Is that in Wyoming?
That's in Wyoming, yes. We are working in a bone bed of dinosaurs, which probably has remains of 10 to 20,000 animals. These are big animals, 30 to 40 feet long, and there are a lot of bones there. And we have been working there for 10 years, and each year we dig out about 1,000 bones and bring them back to the laboratories in Keene and at Southwestern Adventist University, and we clean and prepare these bones and curate them into the collection. The bones are still the property of the ranch, but the collection responsibility and the care of the bones is ours.
Well, you know, I want to just say, and forgive me, we've known each other for 35 years, so you after 35 years, you tend to pick up nicknames. So you may hear me call him John, occasionally Lomi, and sometimes Rabbi, so or all of the above, because we're friends. But I wanted to just, we know that the sort of anchor person is Dr. Chadwick, but Justin is the tech guy, and I thought it was fascinating some of the technology that is used in conjecture, very new technology to unearth very old things. Justin, give us just a little flavor of what you do as the youngest single member of this enterprise. What is your job? What is your role?
Okay, well, we've got some pictures that show some of that. What we do is collect positional information on the bones we find with extraordinary detail, extraordinary accuracy. We do that because it's important for us to be able to go back later and study details that we might not have thought about in the field, questions we may not have even thought to ask while we were in the field. But if we have that data captured, we can go back and study it later. So what we do is use high-precision GPS equipment, which is accurate actually to about 2 millimeters, to record the position of every single bone we find. And that goes into a computer. And you can see here a picture of the base station, GPS base station. And the way it works is we've got this GPS base station that I'm setting up there. And then there's a rover which we use for collecting the data on each of the bones. So you take this rover around to each of the bones, and what happens is the GPS base station is sitting there collecting data from GPS satellites. It calculates its position, which, as you know, GPS isn't perfectly accurate, so it's always off by some error. Well, it calculates its position, and then it calculates what that error is, and it sends that error correction out over a radio link to the rover, which then subtracts it off of its calculated position, and that allows it to get a precise fix on the point that we're measuring. So the point is, we can get really, really accurate readings on what we find.
Yeah. Dr. Shaw, why is that important to see that, okay, this bone is lying here, this bone is lying across, this bone is, why is that important in the overall scheme of things?
One of the main objectives we have in the dig is to develop a taphonomy for this site. Taphonomy is a geologic term, actually it's a scientific term for people who study everything that has to do with the death of an animal, its exposure and maybe rotting, and then burial, and then whatever happens to it after it's buried until it's excavated again. So the whole history of the animal from the time it's alive until it's excavated is the domain of taphonomy. And taphonomists want to ask the question, why are these bones here? Why do we find these bones and these relationships in the ground? And in order to be able to answer those questions accurately, we want to first know, we want to have the data. We don't want to lose data by digging up a bone and carrying it off. We want to know where the bone was so that if necessary, we could actually reconstruct the quarry from the data we have. And we actually do this in the computer. And Justin may have more to say about that, or Stu.
Is it somewhat forensic in nature? I'm using that term loosely here. Help me understand that.
I guess you could say that. You're trying to squeeze as much information out of every clue that you find to see what you can learn from it.
Okay.
Now you also set up internet traffic out there, really, John, in the wilderness. They are out there. This is not, they're hundreds of miles from the nearest Walmart, so you know they're out there.
I always wonder, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm sitting here wondering, why is it that they don't find these types of things in New York City?
Yeah.
Why does it seem like many of the finds that we talk about are Utah, Wyoming, Arizona, in that region, the base of Colorado, near mountains, almost towards the rockier part of our country. I wonder about that. Maybe I'm wrong about it not being found in New York. Maybe they are, but I just haven't heard of any.
Yeah.
Well, in New York, there's a lot of buildings on top, so...
Yeah,
that may be
gets in the way.
But you'll never know. They're under the subway.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But you also set up internet. There's a lot of things that you do besides just what you're talking about.
Yeah, we've realized pretty early on that it was quite important to make sure that the data we were collecting was safe, because if you lose it, you can't get it back. So we've installed a two-way satellite internet capability at our campsite, so we can upload our data at the end of every day. But of course, that also gives the people that come and participate with us the opportunity to check their email from their tent, which is pretty unique, actually, out in the middle of a cow pasture in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
In our last field season, just this last year, we decided to extend that capability all the way out to our quarry site, which is about a mile from our campsite, and we did that using some pretty cool wireless technology. And we were able to be there in the quarry on the internet, and that's useful for a couple of reasons. Not because we want people checking their Facebook while they're in the quarry, but if we have equipment problems, we could check on things from there, and we have a live webcam actually in the quarry, which was our main goal. So people could actually see what it's like to dig up a dinosaur bone live on the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the question of creation has to come into play when you're involved in a lot of these dinosaur digs. I mean, you have documented, if I'm hearing you correctly, you are there to document the media portion of what's happening. What goes through your mind, and all three of you are Christians, what goes through your mind when you're finding things that often scientists or other paleontologists are saying have a lifespan of 150 million years ago? How do you qualify that? And does it appear to be a battle between paleontology and creation? I know I've thrown a lot of questions out there.
Well, I think one of the things, since I'm just coming to document and record it, like you said, some of the explanations, some of the terminology I'm not familiar with, and so being educated, but even the technology they've just been talking about, when you look, and I think we have some pictures we can look at a little later here, that when you see the bones all lined up and things like they know the heavier bones are at the bottom and the lighter bones, those have ramifications of how they got there. And so for a layman, for me, it's like, wow, this is pretty cool technology. But when they're able to map and you look at the computer and you can see a 3D model of how the bones were and where they're laying and all this kind of stuff, and then talking to the daughter of the owner of the ranch, and I think they're showing some of the pictures now of some of the quarries where all the number of bones, I think Justin can kind of reference it a little better.
This is showing how the bone layer is ordered so that the large bones are on the bottom of the bone layer, and they get smaller and lighter as you go towards the top of the bone layer, which is pretty remarkable and is a clue to how they got there.
So to speak, piling on top of each other.
Well, as I understand from Dr. Chadwick explaining, the common explanation of how the bones got there was an animal is in a river or something, and something happens, dies, and then floats down to a bend in the river. Well, if that would not be the explanation in this situation, because the bones are separated, for one, I forget the technical term, but
Disarticulated.
Disarticulated, yes. They're all separated and scattered, but they're not just scattered, they're scattered in such a way where the heavier bones are in the bottom. So that means something else happened where they transported or something. And so for a layman looking at that, it's like, wow, that's kind of interesting, and it has implications when you start talking about catastrophic events, large bodies of water, and all that kind of stuff, of how they may have gotten there.
Okay, let's go back and run some numbers just a little bit, and then look at what this suggests, because everybody's mind has got to be going in the same direction. When you see this happening, it suggests something, how those bones got there. But you were saying 20,000 of one kind. Talk to us, Doctor, real quick, about the kinds of dinosaur bones you're finding. What kinds of animals are we finding?
The vast majority of the dinosaurs we're finding there are one type. It's called Edmontosaurus annectens. It's a 30 to 40 foot long duck-billed dinosaur. It looks...
Is this a swimmer? Or?
It looks like it lived in water. I think there's ambiguity in the data, and I can't say that for certain, but you really can't say very much for certain about these animals because nobody saw them alive that's here today. So they look like they could have lived in water. Everything else that has a duck bill lives in water, at least in swampy areas. And they are present in huge numbers. In addition to the duck-billed dinosaurs, we find the remains of Triceratops, the dinosaur that has the 3 horns on its head that most people are familiar with, Tyrannosaurus rex, the giant meat-eating dinosaur.
I've heard about that one.
And Pachycephalosaurus, the bone-headed dinosaur, Dromaeosaurus, and raptors, and some other kinds of dinosaurs that are really interesting. There's one that's smaller than a chicken, somewhere in that size range, called Troodon. And it also is a carnivorous dinosaur, and they seem to be present in great numbers by the number of teeth we find.
And they, being so small, it almost would appear that they are the cuisine, when they're surrounded by such large animals.
Actually, the data we have, we do find occasional remains of Troodon, but more often than not, we find shed teeth, which means they were probably feeding. So they may have been scavenging these dead animals, or who knows what was going on. But there are lots of stories that get painted from the data.
Wow.
And it's very difficult, of course, to know for sure. Yeah.
Let's knock the pins out from under a couple of myths then, because someone will say, well, perhaps all of these animals lived together. The idea of 20,000 of anything that size living in one space, it seems a little fantastic to me. But we see movies of animals moving in herds, and maybe that's how all of them got to that one place at one time. 10,000 of this, 10,000 of that. Is that a possibility?
I think it's pretty clear that these animals weren't living in herds that large. If you think about how much let's just take a 30-foot long duck-billed dinosaur, how much food it would take every day just to keep him going. The food they were eating was not high in nutrition, so it would take a lot of food to sustain them. And you just have to imagine a herd of 10,000 of these. How long would it be till the guy in the back got to where the guy in the front is? And would there be any food left?
Yeah.
So I think it's unlikely that they were in a single herd. It's more likely that all of these dinosaurs got killed by something in the external environment, either drowning or it could be something else, some other catastrophe, but certainly I favor drowning. I think that's the one that makes the most sense to me.
Because scientists and, if I use a phrase here, creationists, is there some controversy in the scientific community as to the way that creationists arrive at the reasons for the existence of dinosaurs? Because, you know, because logistically, and I speak theologically, we say, well, the world is about 6,000 years old. But when you look at the extinction of these large species that are tagged as 150 million years ago, you know, 50 million years ago, that's a long time when you think of the creation record. And as you said earlier, men that were around then, if they were, obviously are not alive today to talk about it, but have human remains been found within the region of these fossils?
No, they haven't. In fact, we don't have any human remains with dinosaurs anywhere that I'm aware of. It's, of course, folklore that humans and dinosaurs live together, and there may be something to that as folklore. Where does folklore come from? But we don't have any evidence for that. As far as science is concerned, man is not present in the same layers with dinosaurs.
You say the same layers. Explain that.
Well, the dinosaurs are found in the Mesozoic, which is the middle part of the fossil record. In standard geological reckoning, that would be 100 million years ago, more or less. And humans are found up near the top. Modern humans very close to the top. And we don't really find any verifiable remains of humans down where the dinosaurs are. So those are the data.
Okay.
You have to draw your conclusions based on those data and whatever else you have available.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is you mentioned these dinosaur bones, at least a large number of them, were kind of sitting up on the surface of the ground, kind of just there to be sort of kicked around.
Well, I don't think they were exposed very long, but those animals had to rot somewhere so that the bones could be disarticulated. They could be disassociated from the skeleton. And then those bones, after they were disarticulated, were transported as a single event, a catastrophic event. They were deposited all at once in this layer with a graded bed of bones, from big bones at the bottom to little bones at the top.
Yeah.
So that event happened as part of a catastrophe.
Now, I find that fascinating because if we say dinosaurs existed 150 million years ago and were around for 50 million years, that would say you'd have some at the early part way down, big bones, light bones, and a little later you'd have the ones that died a little later. There should be several layers of all bones. The fact that you've got this pile of bones, the heavy ones down, the light ones up, but all together say that it all happened at one time, fairly short period of time. All of these things were transported and piled into this one spot, not over a long period of time.
Well, that would be true for this particular deposit.
Precisely.
Of course, yeah. You can find other places where there are dinosaurs lower and up above that. So, but in this particular case, the explanation for these dinosaurs, which up until the time we started our study was the one that I think Stu was telling you about the animals crossing the river and drowning and being carried downstream. We now know that's not true. That this did not take place. These bones were not buried over a long period of time. They were buried all at once in a catastrophic event. So we've gone from thinking about things in terms of long period of time and situations as usual to looking at them as being catastrophic.
Yeah.
Let me ask that question to be expanded on. Catastrophic. Would we be suggesting a flood? I'm saying that as a creationist. or as a person believing in the creation record and the flood and Noah's Ark, just simplifying it for somebody who may be trying to follow me in that respect, what kind of catastrophe could we be associating with? Some people say an asteroid, and they always use the term, 65 million years ago, Justin, wiped out all the dinosaurs. Let's try to give some quality of time to that, because catastrophe, I'm trying to find out what kind.
Well, when you get to that stage in your reasoning, you're really running out of data.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to go outside your domain of science and start asking, where else can I learn something about this? And of course, the Bible gives us authoritative counsel about the history of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that counsel is valid. I think it's substantial, and I think it gives us direction. And to ignore that wouldn't make any sense to me. So although I can't say this was a part of the flood or it was not a part of the flood, to me it makes sense that it would fit within the boundaries of the flood.
Mm-hmm.
It is a catastrophic process involving water, and it involved the loss of all the dinosaurs on the earth shortly thereafter. So,
So the conjecture, dare I say, of a flood is sufficient to answer the questions that are raised by this pile of bones in this one place at one time.
sure, it's consistent with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a couple of words in the Bible, I'm going to throw this out for any of you, and they're both found in the book of Job. You find the word behemoth and also Leviathan. How does that fit into any of paleontology, or does it at all?
Well, we kind of have the thought that perhaps the Leviathan that's mentioned in Job might actually be Admonosaurus annectens, our favorite dinosaur.
Do we have any pictures of that type? I mean, I don't know if we do or not.
We don't have any pictures of him with his clothes on.
Okay.
Just bones.
Valley of dry bones. That's another terminology for.
Yeah.
But so the Leviathan, and that's mentioned in the scriptures in a number of places, not just in the book of Job. I think Psalms and Isaiah mentions also Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
But the behemoth, that's one that's mentioned only in Job.
Right.
Any
Well, behemoth has the characteristics of Admonosaurus. It lived in swamps. It ate grass.
Mm-hmm.
It had its strength in its hips,
mm-hmm.
and that's, of course, meaning it's standing up on its rear legs, or at least it's consistent with that. It had scales and a lot of characteristics that we know dinosaurs had. So, and what's interesting is some people like to think of dinosaurs as some weird
anomaly,
freak of nature, but if this is what it's talking about there in Job, God says these are the first of the creation of God. So, and I happen to think personally, my own personal belief, which has nothing to do with science, but I think that is a description of duck-billed dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
because
In fact,
go ahead.
Sorry, it's kind of in this context that I realized after going to the dig and then watching a lot of the different science channels and television when they have books or videos on the dinosaurs, how much of that is just made up.
Conjecture.
Dr. Chadwick would say, well, the fossil record doesn't indicate any of that. So when they're talking about they're going in herds and how they look at, those are all just sort of constructed ideas. They're like a novel, if you will, of what they think it was.
The mother dinosaur is lovingly tending to her nest of eggs. It's interesting to think about, but it's stories.
It's conjecture. Now, Stu, just to sort of define your role a little bit, you're a media guy, you're a video guy, so you are documenting all of this stuff. For what purpose? For television, for archival purposes? What are you doing?
Well, for several purposes. The primary, there's several aspects to it. One, like I mentioned, I'm involved with Southwestern working with the students, and one of the goals is to provide opportunities for the students to work on real projects. And we feel like the content and the subject matter, this is very important, and it's definitely a real project. So we're working on 3D models and different things like that. So it's giving the opportunities for students to work on real projects, perfect their skills, and work in mission. The second is just there's one of the things a number of years ago I was working on the program with Pastor Nelson, you referenced earlier, called The Evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, one of the things we discovered, it's very difficult to get accurate information. And what do I mean by that? because of the debate, both sides tend to maybe overstretch their argument. And so the information gets twisted. It's almost like propaganda back and forth. Well, one of the things that's really enjoyed working with Dr. Chadwick and Justin and all their team is, if you notice earlier, Dr. Chadwick says, well, as a scientist, this is what the data says. And then he considers the Bible as another credible, authoritative source. But he's making those clarifications, so he's doing very good science on the site. And then ultimately to discover what is that telling us. And the other bit of information in working with that show discovered is that there's a lot of voices explaining the evolutionary perspective, but there's very quiet or very few voices that you hear clear statements of the wealth of data out there that if we choose to decide to believe in the flood or an ordinary creation, there's a lot of data that, just like we talked about, it's consistent to conclude that a flood happened. None of us were there.
Right.
So, but there is a lot of information that says, hey, it's consistent. We're not being ridiculous, in other words, to say, hey, this is the way it is.
Yeah, see, I think that's important, John, because it says that you're not walking on water, you're walking on land. I mean, there's good, solid evidence for your belief. It's not a leap of faith. There's scientific background undergirding for what you believe. It just so happens that the truth is in the Word, and the Word corresponds with what you're finding. But you're out to find truth, and truth corresponds with truth. Truth answers the truth.
I'm going to throw this question out there because it's never too late to learn, and I've been educated earlier prior to the program, and I appreciate you clearing up some of the novice understandings that I had. I used the word carbon dating, but I've since then learned it's radiometric dating. Oftentimes that I would say that means has been introduced into the equation, Justin, any one of you, to sometimes verify how old these finds are or the bones are. How does that measure up to verifying the age of some of the things you find? Any one of you?
Well,
radiometric dating.
You're correct. Carbon dating is a type of radiometric dating, and it addresses a very specific type of question that you're trying to ask. For example, carbon dating is, I believe, the only method that can be used to date fossils.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's what you have to use, but it's only accurate back in time so far. So, and it's also based on a set of assumptions, which is something that a lot of people don't know. They think, well, you take your sample, you put it in the carbon dating machine, and it gives you, okay, this is X number of years old, but it's not like that. It's based on assumptions all the way through the process. And that's not to say that it can't be accurate in some cases, because it has been a very good tool for science, but it is based on assumptions, so you can't take the results that it produces always and say that is absolutely rock solid, not able to be contradicted.
So just what are some of the assumptions? What does a person who's come to the table with? What does he bring? What baggage does he bring?
Well, you come in with your pre-existing worldview. So if you already believe that the Earth is billions of years old, then if you see data that conflicts with that, then you're probably not even trying to be dishonest. It just would appear to you that that's an error in your experiment, for example. So, oh, this came out to be 6,000 years old. Well, I must have made a mistake. So those kinds of things, I think, can happen and would happen because your worldview is preset. And I have a pre-existing worldview, too. So I think to ask different questions than somebody with a different worldview would think to ask.
Now I threw that out there because, you know, we always use these terms, and I go back to what I said earlier. How far back are these fossils to have existed? How long ago were they alive on the Earth? And then when we go back to the catastrophic event, what caused their extinction almost, it seems like, almost at the same time? I mean, we don't know if some survived and others died later on, but it seems as though, at least what I've been hearing, in the field of, not archaeology, in the field of the study of dinosaurs and paleontology, is that some great event just wiped them out all at the same time. And so when we try to nail that down, the method of carbon dating seemed to have been the one that talks about. But what you said just a moment ago, I want to ask you this question. When you say that we're working in an assumption, would it be similar to say, well, we have north, east, south, and west, and coordinates all in between? Would it be synonymous to saying, well, I'm trying to get directions, but there only exists east and north, and the other two coordinates are missing, so I'm assuming where I'm going? So that's kind of synonymous to that?
I guess in a sense you could say that. I think one of the core assumptions of carbon dating is that things were present in nature in the same quantities and relative quantities that they are today.
Mm-hmm.
And that may or may not be true.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It seems like evolutionary science takes a number of leaps of faith for granted. They talk about the faith-based standing of creationists. It appears to me that evolution takes as much faith, if not more, to believe in that than it does to believe in creation.
Sure, and this brings up a really interesting point about radiometric dating. It is an area where we don't have all the answers. And of course, if you're a layperson, you want to have answers to every question. If you're a scientist, you kind of like to have questions that are unanswered, so you have some work to do. But so it doesn't really bother a scientist to have unanswered questions. It's kind of a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But having that question unanswered leaves a great gap in our understanding of the world around us. And it's very difficult with radiometric dating telling us that these animals lived 500 million years ago or 400 million years ago. It's difficult for us to try to fit that into a scenario of a recent creation. And it's also difficult for an evolutionist to explain where life came from or why it is that we have all the complexity of modern forms already present in the Cambrian. There really has been almost no innovation in molecular biology since the very first fossils that we find.
Wow. We
have fossils that were around when we first find them in the fossil record, the beginning of the Cambrian period, at the bottom of the geologic column, the Phanerozoic time scale, that are still alive today. And we know how complex they are today, and we look at the way they work, and they work exactly the same way as our bodies do. And so all that innovation and all the complexity of molecular biology was already present when we first find animals on the Earth. How does that fit with an evolutionary scene?
Yeah.
That doesn't fit at all. So it looks to me like there's a balance, and in this balance, God has put enough things on both pans so that the decision we make cannot be based on science. It has to be based on something outside of science. I don't think if the pans look like this, it would be unfair. Whichever pan is up and down, it would be unfair to have all the evidence on one side, because God wants us to make our decisions based on free will. This whole controversy is about free will. And if God takes that away, how is anybody going to choose not to believe in God? And so I think, in a sense, God is allowing us not to understand certain things like radiometric dating. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't be working on solutions, but there are some things in the fossil record, in radiometric dating and other things that we don't have good answers for. And I believe that God wants us to seek those answers. And that's kind of what we're doing in the Dinosaur Project. Is people were worried about what are dinosaurs and why are they here and when did they die out. And so by learning as much as we can about these animals, we're filling in some of the gaps. And it's interesting that while we're doing that, we're finding out that these don't look like they died millions of years ago. They look like they died catastrophically, perhaps not very long ago. And that brings us to these recent findings of tissue in the bones and so on that you probably heard about.
Yes.
And that tells us that it can't have been very long ago.
Now, I'm told that scientists are just recalculating, and they're saying if we found living live DNA in a dinosaur bone, then we just have to change our hypothesis. Evidently, it can live for millions of years. So you just take out the eraser, kind of erase what was on the blackboard and write something new, you know, as opposed to rethinking your whole, your original hypothesis. Maybe it's just wrong.
And that's a trait of human nature,
Yeah.
to try to hold on to things that you've invested a lot into as the evidence comes in. And Thomas Kuhn, who wrote the book about paradigms, he says, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, he says a lot of times you just have to wait till people die off for changes to come. Because we do not let go, and I include myself in this, we do not let go of cherished ideas easily. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing in many respects. But there is a time when you have to say the evidence from molecular biology is overwhelmingly in favor of a creator God. Uh-huh. We have to change our way we look at nature. Mm. And I think those are the kinds of decisions that we have to make as individuals.
Yeah, and that's powerful. And Pastor, before your next question, we need to say we're coming down to the end of our first hour. Two things. One, our free offer for the night is a DVD of this particular program. There is much information, some of it a bit technical, so we want to give you the opportunity to sort of go over it at your leisure, to study it, to spend some time with it, to sort of absorb and digest it. And so if you will email us at freeoffer@3abn.org, that's freeoffer@3abn.org, or call us 618-627-4651. We will get the DVD of this particular program out to you, and you can go over it again and again should you wish to do so, and sort of bone up on some of these things. We've talked about a number of things, and we've dug up a lot of stuff. So you can have it. Just email us, freeoffer@3abn.org, call us 618-627-4651, and we'll get it right out to you. Let me also add, you can use that 618-627-4651 should you have any questions. Perhaps you've heard something that intrigues you, you have a question for these erudite gentlemen. They can answer anything that you have to ask. We certainly do hope so. You can email us at live@3abn.org. That's live@3abn.org. Or again, use that number, 618-627-4651, and we'll get to your questions in the second half of the broadcast.
One of the things I want to talk about the second hour is the Mesozoic period era you talked about. And in understanding that, my understanding is it's divided into three different areas, like the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous area. I want to talk about that in the second hour to see how they arrived at these time periods, and then what evidence there is existing out there to bolster the creation story, because we are creationists. We do believe the validity of the Bible record, but these bones do exist, and how do they lend themselves to saying to us, God, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and all that in them is. Mm-hmm. They couldn't get here by any other means, so God had something to do with the existence of this, and I think the second hour would bring us some of that understanding.
Yeah. We've got a short video clip because we want to talk about the dig itself and what your day is like. It's kind of a fascinating thing. I was saying this would be a good way to spend some vacation time, to go out and actually get dirty, dare I say. Yeah. But let's look at this clip and tell us what we're looking at and how this interfaces with your regular day.
Well, this is the place we work. It's just fantastically beautiful, out in the middle of nowhere.
That
peaceful,
is nowhere.
And gorgeous. We start out the day walking to the quarries, which you see there, and we start digging for dinosaur bones. And it's not long before after you sit down on your patch of dirt before you strike bone. And so as you find a bone, you work on it, and you dig around it, and you expose it fully. And it comes out of the ground, and the GPS person comes around and records its position. You write it. You write all its information down in your field notebook. And then we break for lunch, share some stories from the day together, and then we head on home for supper a few hours later. So it's really a delightful experience. The people there become kind of like family members, and it's the highlight of my year, I can tell you that.
Now, your work day begins at what hour? What time do you get up?
We call it 6 a.m., but it's actually 5.
Okay. And you work till?
Oh, about 5.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's a good long day.
Yeah, and you can see there the number of people who participate with us. It's not a small group.
I always notice at many of these digs that you don't see forklifts and big tractors, because what you find is of such delicate nature that I notice people use brushes and small
Dentist picks,
and I'm thinking that would define the word tedious to me, but it has a value in the after effect of what you find.
It may, it may look tedious, but as you're actually doing it, it's so fascinating because you find this the first thing you see is just this tip of bone, and you have no idea what it is. And so it's this puzzle, it's this mystery that you're putting together, and you're trying to visualize where is this bone going in the dirt as you dig away at it. And as it starts to become exposed, it just kind of reveals more and more secrets to you, and it's fascinating. It's really anything but tedious.
Well, in fact, I was there when they had found, in fact, we got some video of it where they found a jawbone, but the way it was oriented, they couldn't see the teeth. And so my understanding is if there's teeth on the jawbone, it can tell a lot more than just the jawbone itself. And so kind of everyone gathering around, and since it's so delicate, they have to turn it over, and they don't want it to break apart, and so they're just waiting to see, is this going to have teeth on it or not? And it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That is exciting. What I want to ask you when we come back right at the end of the first hour is, what is the biggest bone you found, and what is the smallest one you found? I'm curious because the big bone will take a long time to get unearthed, but we'll ask that and some other questions when we return. Stay by. We'll be back in a moment or two after this short break.